Yo, what's good? Welcome back to another interview. And oh my goodness, so we got a big one today. I am super excited to share this with you guys, of course. Anders and I have a really interesting conversation about his early career, right? While he was at university, started doing the casting. It forms a bit of a crossroads, I suppose. We also touch on the university system and how it's a little bit flawed. Both of us, I think, having similar experiences with that. And then move forwards into the more modern stuff, right? Talk about Skybox and how he plans to further integrate that into broadcasts. Talk about content creation, of course, always seems to crop up in these interviews, but more of a perspective from someone who's had a heavier hand in content creation for the bigger operators within the scene. So little less speculative than some of my other interviews, right? And then we move on to quite an intriguing conversation about characters on the broadcast, or just within the scene in general, both players and talent, and how, particularly for players, they fear showing off the fullest extent of their personality. So we talk a bit about that and how it might indeed help, make broadcasts a bit more interesting, to have some of that trash talk that, the likes of Flashpoint have tried to get in the past year or so. But look, really, really interesting conversation with this guy, and it's so easy to talk to him. Very, very conversational. I think we were both into that. I still got to ask some of the questions that I wanted to ask, but nice and loose, nice and chilled, nice and laid back, and that's the way that I enjoy conducting these interviews. I think I've come round to that. Just very quickly to mention, I am now going to start uploading more regimented with an upload every Wednesday. Of the interviews at the very least, right? And then hopefully going to get some of these more content ideas that I've been talking about for a while, going to start to get them out once I figure out the structure of them, I suppose. But either way, without further ado, let's get into the interview. All right, everybody, welcome back to another Sit Down with Skriv. I am joined today by a man that maybe doesn't need an introduction, but nonetheless, I am here with Anders. I really, really want to thank you for coming on the show, my friend.
You're welcome. I'm glad you took the initiative. Glad we figured it out. It took a little bit of time to set up, but I appreciate it.
All right, cool. So kicking off into the first question, generally where I start with most of my guests as well, I think, as I mentioned to you beforehand, right, like you do have a bit more of a profile going, so I'll kind of change the question a little bit, but usually I ask if you could give a brief history of how you started as a commentator. But then I suppose in your case, you've talked about a little bit in other interviews that, you wanted to stick in and around technology and gaming and whatnot. What was it that made you decide to stay with casting? Was it like a hobby that ended up being successful, or maybe was there like a crossroads somewhere where you had to make a decision? What, gives you that drive in the early days to stick with the commentary work?
I mean, yeah, it was kind of a hobby, that just took on pretty quickly. But I think it was partly fueled by the fact that I didn't really know what I want to do with my life outside of that. Like, I had ditched a bunch of different university degrees. I had ended up studying English, but I kind of knew in the back of my mind that I probably wasn't really finishing this degree. And I was like on the third year of doing it, so I was kind of deep into like some sort of a bachelor's degree in that. And I knew that there were like certain courses I just hated, and like anything to do with grammar and stuff, I just didn't really have any time for. So I knew that without admitting it to myself. And so every time when you have like time off of a semester at university, I would go and find something. So I bought like a piano. Might be visible in the background. Like I wanted to do something else. I started trying to write a book. I had an idea for like a movie script or a book that I wanted to write. Like every time I had like time off, I would pick up instantly something else, which is probably a sign that you're not enjoying your university degree all that much. Like, it wasn't like my time off was spent, really, what is this poetry stuff? And I should be reading up on some Shakespeare, whatever. Like, that wasn't my passion, right? I just went to university because, I don't know, that's what people do. But so then when I found this casting thing and I really liked it, and I was like, I'm really enjoying this, like way too much. It's actually really fun. The fact that there was nothing else that was currently going on in my life that I really enjoyed, from like a career or education perspective, I think that helped a lot. So it's like I don't know, like I don't want to say rock bottom, but it helps if you don't have a lot of things that you are really into at that point in time.
Yeah, I think some of it kind of, not to immediately bring me into the conversation kind of thing, but like some of that resonates with me as well. I went to uni just because, especially in my kind of circle of friends and everything, like everyone was going, so it felt strange in the back of my mind, even though I knew I wanted to do this from a young age. I still felt that I kind of had to go just to have that there, and then I wouldn't say the whole time, but for most of it, it definitely felt a little redundant in places, because I guess it gave me a bit of access to money and freedom, but other than that, there wasn't an awful lot.
Sure. Do people? I have to ask this. Do people in the UK? Does everyone keep selling each other this idea that you have to have like a plan B or something? Because that's like a very common. At least it was when like 20 years ago or something, when I was in ninth grade or something. But people kept saying this thing, something along the lines of, "Oh, you should always have something to fall back on." I think like, what kind of planning is this, where you spend the majority of like your life trying to plan for the thing that you maybe don't want to do, but at least you have it as the sort of thing. I'm like, that doesn't actually make any sense if you think about it for more than like 5 seconds. And yet everyone keeps saying it, I've noticed.
Yeah, I think so. Especially, in my kind of schooling environment, being a publicly funded school, they therefore wanted good statistics for our students who stay on for sixth form, which is like, the college attached to the high school kind of thing. They end up going to university. They can then turn that in kind of thing. So there was an awful lot, especially, it's not like I went to many careers advisors saying that I want to get into esports. How do I do that? But there was an awful lot of pushing people towards doing a degree as soon as possible and whatnot, not even taking like a year out. Make sure if you do take a year out, you're on a deferred year, so you're still going to end up at university. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of energy of plan B. Interestingly enough, it was like my parents who were a bit more like, are you sure you want to go? Take some time, maybe have a year out, consider your options. But I kind of made my mind up by then.
Yeah, fair enough. I looking back now, I kind of wish that I had been more, because it wasn't just that I was getting pushed into it. I also have like this personality flaw of sorts where I kind of want to, like, I think I wanted to go to university because I wanted people to think that I was smart enough to go to university, basically. And I kind of, looking back now, if I could like time travel back and with the same mindset I have now, I think I would choose something completely. I would say, who cares about any of that? Let's just like, wouldn't it be cool? Like now, whenever I see people who are doing like carpentry or anything, I think like, man, those are actual skills to have. Like you can actually build something. You could look at something and sort of know how to put it all together. Those things just seem cool to me now. So I kind of, like I guess it's like it's hard to have that mentality. Maybe I don't know if you're really young or something like that, but I know that it wasn't just that, the plan B or like something to fall back on for me. It was also like the other thing that I kind of secretly also wanted, to show up and be like, yeah, I've got a bachelor's degree in this thing, or I'm working on my PhD. It sounds cool, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot that comes into it. And like I mentioned, the freedom of university, and then there's this whole kind of air, again, at least in the UK, I can't really comment everywhere, but of like, you find yourself when you're at university, you have all that freedom and you meet like-minded people and whatnot. So there's a bit more of an experience sold to us as well, not just the fact that you're getting an education. And some people definitely, I'd say that my grades took a bit of a hit because of casting and whatnot, but there are certainly some people that just go to university for the experience and aren't really bothered about what they come out with in the end.
I almost prefer that, as stupid as it sounds, because I realize everyone is like, but it almost makes sense to me to do that. Like, you treat it like that and you think like, oh, it's just, I'll see what I get out of this. And then, later on we'll, maybe the grades will matter, but probably not, right? Like, I don't even see how that is even relevant no matter what. Like, I just think the whole system on that front is really weird. But yeah, but just to bring it back, right? Like for me, it helped. I think it would have been tougher to go all in on the casting front if I had really loved English as a degree. I mean, I love English in a bunch of other ways, but I didn't have the passion for it enough that you should have gone to university. I just had the passion enough that, I could just be like, sort of an enthusiast about it, in like it could be like a side hobby of my own, but if you have a hobby, you don't go to university to like pursue that hobby. Like to do that, you really have to be really nerdy about whatever it is you enjoy, right? And but so I think for me it helped that that wasn't how I felt about it, and I just didn't have feel. I felt like I had really no other things really going, and I was searching for something else. And like I said, I spent a lot of time trying different things, and this is one in a long line of different things that I wanted to try, and for some reason this worked, and I really liked it, and I knew instantly, like the first day I did it, I was like, I don't want to do anything else right now, and I made up in my mind that I was like, I'm done with it, I'm quitting. I didn't tell my girlfriend, who went on to become my wife, but I just I knew I'm out, I'm out of this.
Yeah, I think to be fair, it's quite a big issue that a lot of young people have, even seeing university through to the end kind of thing, right? And you get there, and then suddenly it's like, if you don't have something that's super super applicable, I don't know, like your medicines or your laws or something along those lines, you kind of sat there like, do I just want to go into the pigeonhole? I've got a history degree, so therefore I become an archivist, or I've got an English degree, so therefore I go into marketing, or whatever kind of, generally easy path there is. I think there's certainly a lot of young people that are unsure and struggle to find the thing that really gives them the drive that, is something that they want to do for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I heard the story once, and I never checked if it's true or not, which I guess you should always do, because I don't know, there's a lot of, I don't know, weird urban legends on the internet. But it was about this guy who was like an interviewer for like one of those important universities, like Stanford or some place like that. And he was doing like those admissions interviews for kids, and he started asking. He would ask people every time that they would come in. He would say, how, like, what would you do if you had infinite resources? Like, if you had all the money, you could just travel, like you could just do whatever you wanted. That if that was not a problem, what do you want to do? Because you're here interviewing to become a lawyer or a med student or something like that. So what if you had all the money? What would you want to do? And he's noticed that people were saying things like, I want to, I want to write a book, or I want to, I want to learn music, and I want to, maybe like play in a theater. People were saying all these other things, right? Whereas, and he just started telling people something along the lines of, well, just do that then. Like, don't be here. Like, if you want to write a book, then why are you signing up to become a lawyer? Like, that doesn't make sense, And obviously the point that people obviously will say is that, yeah, but I can't. There's no way to make a living writing a book. Like, I could be doing that for 30 years before I have some sort of a breakthrough. Or I could just be writing the same book for 30 years if it's a really elaborate book, right? And how am I going to live? So I have to become a lawyer so that I can write the book in my spare time. And obviously people never do that. And then it just becomes this whole sad thing. And whether or not that story is true or not, like, again, I never checked, but I think that there is something about that where to some extent it is, there's something backwards about the way that we're putting everything together. But then on the other hand, I realize I'm also suffering from like survivorship bias, in the sense that, because I actually, fell into the, like, randomly at the right time, and like luckily fell into the thing that was just like at the right moment, and like no one cared about CS:GO at the beginning, and I just happened to like weirdly stumble into it, and then it kind of worked out. Now, so for me, it's super easy to sit here and say like, hey, you should follow your dreams, do whatever you want. Like, I understand that that's also, it's not that easy, but there is something really wrong with the way that things are being, I think, set up for most people anyway. And I don't know what to do about it, but it's definitely an issue,
Yeah, for sure. And I think as these things like university and your sort of easier paths, not necessarily, easier in completion or whatever, but getting there, right? There's not as much of a push. You kind of go through the motions at school, and generally speaking, if you're happy with where you're at kind of thing, you'll keep on that same path. You do something that, like you're alluding to, you're interested in, but you're not maybe super, super passionate about. I, again, did the same thing. I did politics at university, and it's something that I do have an interest in, but not so much of a passion that I can look past the flaws in the teaching, or the flaws in the modules that are available, or whatever it may be, and finding actually I have more of an interest in specific areas of politics, not politics as a whole, but I can't really go back, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that I completely guess how it was for me. There's certain parts of English that I really enjoyed, and then most of the other courses that I had to take, I was like, I guess I'll just do this, for no reason. So Yeah, I think that's if you're in that kind of situation, it's a sign maybe that this is not really for you. Because on the other hand, I have noticed this when you run into students that really love their subject and really are into it, there might be some things they prefer more than others, but generally they're quite excited about what they're doing and like they, like they're kind of into it. I think that's kind of how it should be. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the recipe is if you're in that kind of scenario listening to this and you're thinking, man, that could be me. Maybe I should do something else. I can't even tell you how to find that, but I mean, like, I think it is worth doing some sort of like inventory of your own life at one point or another, and sort of saying, if you're front loading the sort of I need a job to make money so that I could do the thing that I really want to do, at least make absolutely sure that that is not just going to become a lie, and like, that you just tell yourself for 40 years and then you never did the thing that you actually wanted to try and do. And it's just like, because I think that could pretty easily happen. So at least check it out. I would say that's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Nothing but time kind of thing while you're young, and I think young people are quite quick to forget that.
Yeah, and maybe something else that's also probably true. I mean, this is again going to sound like some real boomer type talk now, but like, I don't know anyone at all ever that's made like a plan in their like mid-teens or early 20s or something like that, and it's actually like worked out for like, like everyone has this like, yeah, I'll go to university, I'll get this degree, and then I'll get this job and start this career somewhere. Nothing ever works out like that. Something crazy always happens to people. Someone gets hit by a bus and then it turns out they find out they want to do something else, and like it's just never that easy. So I feel like even if you like, so sticking to those plans, like it was possible to plan everything like 10 years ahead, it doesn't even make any sense. So I don't know. I feel like it's, maybe people shouldn't take it so seriously anyway, this whole planning things. It's just, again, it goes back to that whole like elementary school into high school into university kind of thing, where it's like we keep telling people that they can plan things that way and that, like they must lay all the foundation stones and then get build something on top of it. Like nothing works like that really. So I think we're being given a lot of bad information on this front, and it's causing people to be, more miserable. But again, on the other hand, if I hadn't been in that moment, if I hadn't been in that sort of frame of mind, then I think I would have maybe skipped over the casting. I don't know. Maybe I would have never tried it. I don't know. So yeah, in a way, I'm happy that that university sucked for me. So
yeah. I mean, you can always look back, but at the same time, I think I'm a relatively firm believer in the fact that everything happens for a reason, or at the very least, you should try and find a reason in everything that happens. But
yeah,
I wanted to move forward a little bit more into the casting itself, right? In those early days when the lands start picking up, right? And I suppose the stronger shift towards Go comes in and things maybe around 2013, 2014. I think it became quite evident quickly that you have an innate ability to kind of work with the crowd. Is that something that, you've focused on from the get-go, or some, before, during a cast, or does it come a bit more naturally to you?
Yeah, I think it does. It's weird because I don't know if those VODs are still out on YouTube somewhere, but some of the very first games that I did, I actually didn't want to do any play-by-play casting at all. I just wanted to do like some analytics stuff, because in the beginning of CSGO, really no one was talking about like the strategies of the game. Like I never heard any mention of grenades. Like no one ever, like we just take all that for granted now, but no one ever said like, oh yeah, they're throwing these smokes for this reason, or it's kind of a shame that they have no flashbangs left because that's going to make things hard. Like there's no mention of it at all. And I thought that I could do that. I know, I kind of know. I mean, I've played competitively in 1.6, not at like some mega level, but I we had plans, we had strategies, we knew how to throw smokes and stuff like that. So I was like, I can't understand why they're not talking about this. And I thought, maybe I could do that. So then the first game that I did, I didn't do any play-by-play. I just talked over the game. And I realized as I was doing that this makes no sense. It felt so awkward to sort of ignore, like, like this, there's a 1 second defuse left, and you're just talking about like, but that ramp execute that they were doing was really, quite good. And I just, it felt so strange in my own mind even, that I just instantly knew, like I had to push myself into, like getting excited about it. I mean, I'm excited about the game, so it wasn't like hard to get excited, but I had to put away like the weird analytical, like voice, and just sort of go with it. Which I'm sure if people find the VODs, hopefully no one ever will, but I'm sure it'll sound really weird now. Like there's probably been a lot of learning since. But then if you take that and you move it forward into the crowd scenario, because it's one thing doing it online, I don't really notice, like, I don't feel like there's a lot of people because it's just you're just in your room. So I feel like that's probably fine. But in a crowd, I mean, I was nervous a little bit the first time maybe, but not really, and I don't really know why, because I'm a very like introverted person, like in some side, almost in like some sort of extreme degree, I think. I don't meet many other people who are like me, I would say, when it comes to like sort of, yeah, for me, I don't think of it as social isolation, but I just don't. I'm fine not being around people a lot, like a lot more than most people I know. Um, and it's a problem sometimes for me because I forget that other people don't think this way, and I have to sort of like actively remind myself to like, oh wait a minute, yes, we need to do things. Like I'm married and have 2 kids and everything, but like so that, which is like a good way to get pushed more into doing that. But so for me, like I don't think it comes, speaking to a lot of people doesn't come naturally. But when I'm talking about Counter-Strike, I don't really care because I just imagine that everyone there is just there to enjoy Counter-Strike. So like we're all just kind of nerding out about the game that we like, and I just, so I don't know why, but it just doesn't bother me that much actually.
Yeah, I guess in a sense the enjoyment and just kind of being there for the game trumps your worry for performance in a sense, maybe, or at least in those early days, maybe as things have, don't want to speak for you obviously, but like as things have gone on, I think it's just sort of obvious that improvements are made and things like that.
Yeah, and I think also I trust myself to know the game enough that I'm not going to say something that's really stupid. Like maybe I'll get something wrong. Like that happens all the time, and I'm okay with that. Like in fact, I think it's pretty important to risk being wrong if you're going to be doing casting, because there's no way that you can get everything right. I mean, and a lot of the stuff that you're saying anyway, in my opinion anyway, is not going to be, you're not trying to like divine truth out from the game. You're telling a story about what's happening in that moment, and like it doesn't have to be the correct, like it's good if you could be reminded later, or if, I mean, sometimes people do that and they say, hey, I noticed you said this thing during the broadcast and I think you missed the fact that there was this other thing happening. That's great. Like if that happens, that's amazing, because now next time a similar scenario occurs, you can change it, you can actually get even better information out there. But I'm not worried about completely, like screwing something up to the point where everyone's going to be rolling their eyes and thinking this is embarrassing. Why doesn't he understand how this works? And he's saying that they're playing this badly, but in fact they're playing it really well. They just like, they were just unfortunate, and he didn't even know what was happening. So I've never been worried about that. So I feel like that probably gives me like enough of a platform to think, okay, as long as I'm not doing that, it's going to probably be fine. And then, to be honest, when you're in front of like a big crowd, like I think people don't always think about this, but obviously you can do a good job in front of the crowd and make the experience better for them, but the crowd will make the experience incredible for you as a caster. Like it's so much fun, and you get so much out of it that it's. I mean, I don't know if it's sure. I feel like it's kind of hard to screw it up. Like it's almost like you're just kind of riding some sort of wave at this point in time, and you're just surfing on top of it. And like if you use that analogy, right, no one would show up and credit the surfer on the wave for how big the waves are. You just say, "Oh, big waves there. It's amazing. Like, good job." And maybe it's great if they don't fall over or whatever. But ultimately, like, that's sort of what it feels like in those moments. Like, I don't think about it that much when it's happening. I'm just kind of there and enjoying it. And yeah, I think that's a part of that. I'm sure if I was very nervous, I'm sure it would be different, and I would, be more intimidating. But I don't feel that way.
So how do things change this past year then? I'm sure this is a question that you've had a fair amount of, but the antithesis of, working in front of a crowd and how that affects you. Have you, I guess, found it difficult to shift, or does it just kind of harken back to your humble beginnings, as it were, in your bedroom kind of thing?
Yeah. I think I've gone through this process before because there's this weird numbing effect that happens when you go from having, like, even online. You're like, I remember the first broadcast when we got to like 10,000 viewers, and then we had like some broadcast there was like 50,000 viewers, and then eventually for some of the majors where you had the in-game number of viewers, and it would go like, oh, we're past 1 million viewers, right? Now the problem with going past 1 million simultaneous viewers online, even if they're not like a stadium in front of you, but just the thought that there's 1 million people tuning in at the same time, that means now next time when it's just 10,000, you think, what's the point of this? Why there's only 10,000 people? It's nothing. Like, it doesn't even, like, there's hardly anyone listening, Whereas of course that's not true, and it's a horrible thing to be thinking. And if you think that way, it will ruin the experience for you, and it will and the audience, they won't know why, but they will feel like this guy seems less interested than he was, last week or the week before. But it's almost impossible not to feel that way. It's so hard to fight it. And I mean, this will go for everything, right? If you make I don't know, 50,000 euros a year, but then you I don't know, get an upgrade in your pay, so now you're making 5 million a year, then like the things that used to be a big expense for you, or you really cherished, like buying this thing like once a year, you had a chance to do this, those things just will always, like, they'll just fade out compared to what they were before. And it's super dangerous because, and I don't know how to fight it other than to try and keep realizing that it's happening, like try and notice whenever it's happening. And the same thing happens, with crowds. In the beginning, if there's like 50 people, it's like, yeah, oh wow, like 50. Eventually, if you're in Cologne and there's close to 15,000 people, and you think, like, that's the new standard. But now when we go back to 2000, it feels like, man, so not really that many people, So I feel like I've already been through that many times, of like the sort of up and down of it, even just within the same tournament, right? Like, because some tournaments the reset will be, now we're back to a group stage. The next season has started. We're all in the studio. There might not be even any players in the studio because they might just only come in later for like the playoffs or something like that. So even then, you feel this weird contrast in your mind. So I feel like this time with Corona, it actually coincided for me with a point in time where I was kind of getting back into like trying to do the casting. Like, I mean, I don't know if more seriously, but I wanted to like put more energy into it anyway. Like, I wanted to try and do that more because I felt like I was sliding down the other path of things kind of being like, oh yeah, it's just a job, and I'm just kind of, and I'm used to people, like I'm used to a crowd, and I'm used to like this. Everything was becoming like a little bit too stale, I thought. So I was already doing that, and the fact that Corona happened for me was like, it sucks, but I didn't feel like I got hit by that feeling this time. I felt like I was kind of riding. I was already coming back from that side anyway. So the fact that there was now more of it is like, whatever. I'm already of the mindset that I'm going to be fighting any mentality to feel like this isn't a big deal just because we happen to be in a studio instead of an arena.
Yeah.
But I recognize the idea of it though really hard, and it's really annoying.
Yeah. I suppose it's kind of interesting that that shift has been there, and then I guess in a sense. There's a little bit of like, well, a bit of lack of control, there's not a lot that you can do about it. And you just kind of have to, everyone's in the same boat, that kind of thing. A lot of people tend to like talk about the negatives of it though. I was just curious, is there maybe for you, again, having done just studio setups in the past, or maybe the fact that there's so much going on and it has been a little familiar from broadcast to broadcast, maybe that gives room to experiment, kind of thing. Are there any positives that you can see in working in that studio environment as compared to like the LAN environment, I guess is what I'm getting at?
I think there have been, I don't know, I wish I could say that what had happened, because that would have been, I think, there's a huge problem right now in all of esports, right, which has to do with monetization and how tournament organizers can find a way to make money, which they deserve to make and they should be making. And I mean, there are a lot of reasons why they're currently not, and it's a big problem that everyone should be worried about, because eventually they will not be able to keep going the way that they are if nothing changes. So I kind of in some ways wish, and I mean, one of the reasons why they're not making money right now collectively is that they're all at war with each other for calendar dates and real estate and upping the production value and getting it's all just, and all of those things just cost more and more and more, right? So the sort of the war between them cost money, but no one seems to be finding like the real business plan to make it all make sense in the end. So my dream for this Corona period was a little bit like, what if in this space where everything is like artificially forced to come to a stop, and we have to all like take a step back and say, okay, well, hold on, like, what do we do now? How does this work? That actually in that moment, maybe we could have discovered something about how this can work, maybe the ideal Counter-Strike calendar isn't that every other week there's a new like hype LAN tournament. Maybe it does make sense that there's like some online phase that then leads into like a bigger end event, and there's just a few. I don't know what it is, but I was kind of hoping that something like that would happen. It doesn't really seem to me that is actually what has happened. So I don't know if there's that much to be super positive about. I think the whole coaching scandal bug, right? And some of those things that really were like a result of like online Counter-Strike. In some sense, you could say, well, that's horrifying. But on the other hand, if we hadn't had this online how long before we found it? What if it had been persisting for like even like for 3 more years? I don't know. Like the longer it goes on, the worse it is. So it's not good that it happened, but maybe it's good that it was like forced upon us in some strange way, and like it proved that there just are serious problems with running online Counter-Strike tournaments, almost no matter what you do. Like, it's very, very hard to stop people from having advantages that they shouldn't have, or like, whatever it is. So like maybe those things could be like some decent takeaways, even if like the initial circumstance are really hard to deal with. I think it's possible to try and think of it that way. But I don't know. Other than that, I don't know if I can think of like really many sort of positive things around it, honestly. I think it's been pretty hard for most people, and I mean, yeah, I don't know. People have so many different circumstances as well, right? I feel like I've got through it decently well, like mentally as well. I think I've tried to like not lose my mind, basically. But yeah, it's been rough, I think.
Yeah, it's a weird time. I suppose. Yeah. moving past it, we've had our little roadmap in the UK, out of lockdown. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if everything goes to plan. So that's kind of cool and gives a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But interestingly enough, you mentioned like this competition, this war, I suppose, which is a great way of putting it, for sure. I've seen a lot this year that the bigger players especially are trying to bring in like more to a broadcast, right? And Flashpoint with their content ideas, ESL starting to do a little bit of that as well, Blast with like the skin segments, for example, things like that. Where do you see content going in the future, like in terms of the shoulder content? And obviously you yourself have got stuff with Skybox, right? Maybe you could allude to some ideas that you might have to further incorporate that into broadcasts.
Yeah. Counter-Strike it's so weird because content in Counter-Strike in general just doesn't do that well. And I don't know what the reasons are. I mean, different communities just exist in different spaces, right? Like there are, as far as I can tell, there are like Call of Duty communities that exist, and just it's not even really relevant whether or not they're in the top 5 in the world. It's just that the sort of hype environment around them, their social media profiles, like the content they put out. Think of like FaZe or something like that, where it's like it's just driving an enormous amount of viewership, no matter what it is they're doing, and that just doesn't exist in Counter-Strike. And I don't know why, and that almost is a cultural thing that has to change. I have no idea how we're going to go about doing that. But I think one thing that we can do is make better content. Obviously, that will help a lot. But I don't think it's that people in the past have made no good content. It's just that there is something about like the way that Counter-Strike exists. I don't know if it's because it's like it's split between Twitter and the Reddit and HLTV, and maybe there's some 3-way split that means none of those 3 places are working really well. Is there any Counter-Strike content on YouTube currently that's like really blowing up? Like, I don't know. Like, it's, I mean, by the numbers, like, like Richard and Duncan do a good job there. But it's really hard to like find out, I think, what it is that does it. But certainly that's a problem, right? Is that to make content, you need funding, and to get funding, someone very quickly in that conversation will say, what is the viewership like? How many people are actually watching this? And if it's below 100,000, no one will care. People will just say whatever. Like, this is not. I mean, they might give it a chance if they could see, oh, the first episode has got 10,000, then maybe the second one will have 15, and then we can build it from there or whatever. But generally speaking, from like some sort of like macro perspective, it's not really gonna rate that much unless you can start to really show something there. And I mean, I don't know who to blame for it. Like, you could try and blame the audience and say, if you guys want better things, you must, like, do a better job of, interacting, share it with people, get it out there, like, spread it around so that everyone could see it. Like, help us build a culture of like this content doing well, so that more can be created, so that we could do more cool. I don't know who. Like, you can't talk to a whole community that way. Like, it's just made up of individual people. What do you want them to, like? I don't know, make an agreement internally to click more links. Like, I don't even know how you would go down that road. I think it's like a cultural change. I'm not 100% sure how to get there, but I mean, I'm hoping to some extent to bring it on to like the Skybox thing. So one of the things that I started doing with Do Not Peak, the studio in America, with Alchemist and Sir Scoots, and Anthony, who's their video editor, is we wanted to sort of try and tell some stories around essentially how a team won a specific map. Because one of the sort of base premise of the show is something like, if you look back on any big games, like let's say when Cloud9 win the major in Boston, right? And you think, how many people remember how they won? Like, never mind, that they won, and if anyone asks you, you can go on HLTV and check the score immediately and say they won on these maps and it was by this much. Okay, like, who cares? That's completely irrelevant, What is interesting is, like, how did they win? Were they, I don't know, did they have really good AWPing? Were they really aggressive? Were they, like, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know anything about that game. I could tell you nothing about it, really, like, from sort of from any kind of an analytical standpoint. And that seems a shame, because that's part of the history of the game, and it's just like it's not really out there. So that kind of thing we thought was really interesting, and I think maybe that's the problem, is that a lot of Counter-Strike has been pushed towards like headshot highlights, or like, frag highlight clips and everything else. And that's fine, because that's like a big part of the game, but it's not the biggest part of the game, I think. And the other part of the game, which is like how people put together strategies and how it actually works out, and the little cool details. Like, sometimes someone will have a great strategy, but there's like one mistake that they make and it's fatal, and they lose the one round that they had to win. That's important, right? Like, that mistake could be the highlight of the match, because without it, and there's tons of them, where someone misses a flashbang by like 3 inches and their teammate gets killed because no one is flashed, and it's like, and otherwise they just win the whole thing. That happens all the time, and we never notice because we can't see it in the speed of the game. There's no way to check it. So unless someone goes and checks, you'll never actually know the story of the game. And I hope that and I mean, our plan with Skybox is to sort of more or less make it available to everyone. So I'm kind of hoping that if we can give some examples of what kind of stuff could be done in terms of storytelling, that just everyone will just start doing it, because pretty much anyone could just download it and use it and go nuts. Because then that would give more of like the storytelling and less of just the frag highlights, even though those could be very cool. I'm not trying to put them down or anything. I'm just saying that there's a lot more to the game,
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a few things in there for me, like the first, going back to talking about funding and whatnot for content. That to me always feels like you need to give the examples before you've really been given the resources to build the examples. It's that kind of
yes.
Have experience to get experience in a job scenario. Similar kind of analogy. The second thing I think is you talk about like that Cloud9 game, for example. I think there's also a lot of storylines to kind of back up alongside. Obviously the final is quite big, but then the story of how they get there, if I'm remembering correctly, it is a long time ago, but I do remember intently watching that major, and I believe in the Swiss stage they were down 0-2, and then they just, so they could,
right.
they could not lose another game, and they just kept on winning until they won the whole thing. You know, so I think that there's a lot to cover with that, and then you know the analysis helping to build those storylines and going alongside it. And I think you know you talk about trying to find the angle. At the moment, a lot of this kind of shoulder content that is being created is relatively funny, as it were. You know, they're like skits and things like that, which is fair. I think the LEC probably do that very, very well, which is maybe where some of the inspiration, some of the, you know, ideas of this seems to work over there. Yeah. But for me, I think the CS community eat the analysis content up. Right, they prefer that, you know, and maybe there's room for, obviously there's like the kind of live weatherman segment sort of thing going on, and stuff that you've been doing with Skybox and whatnot, but maybe there's room to create longer form analysis content that goes on during the breaks or whatever, or something like that. Because I think for me, I feel that would go down a bit better, and there's a lot of creators out there as well in the you know, the CS space that have now this year started to do their own stuff, you know, classics being like Elmer Putty, but Alan's gotten into it. SEO in the UK scene, he's started up a channel where he's been going like
Launders.
every day. Yeah, Launders has been doing all his stuff. Hawker obviously has been going for a while and having quite a lucrative year at the moment. There's a lot of people, some of the friends that I have, I'll give a shout out to Dweg, he's been on the show before. You know, he's started doing stuff in and around the tier 2 scene and whatnot. You know, it is very popular.
Oh, really?
And there's a lot of people out there that are capable of making it. So I think that for me, I feel if a bit of time, a bit of funding or whatever was given across to some analytical shoulder content, then maybe that could be very, very lucrative.
Well, so the first point that you brought up, right? If I had, let's say I had an idea for like a Netflix TV show that I wanted to make. So I don't know, I write together like a pitch proposal and I go meet with the Netflix people and I say, I think you guys should fund this as a Netflix original. It's an amazing show and it's going to be great. I'm sure they would have lots of questions about like the future of it and all that. One question they probably wouldn't ask is like, how many viewers will the first episode have? Like, how am I meant to prove that? Like, I'm asking you for $100 million to do this thing. Like, you basically have to believe that this idea is good, and that's the pitch, right? But afterwards, we're just gonna all have to jump in together and see how this works, you know. And that's how it works in TV and all the rest of it. Like, I mean, maybe of course, there's such a thing as a pilot episode that you could make a pilot episode and then you could see how that goes. Like, that's fine. But it's a very unique internet kind of phenomenon. This thing where you're essentially being asked to like make the whole thing fly on your own, and then once it's up and running and you actually have the numbers, then people will turn around and say, "Well, now we'll pay you some money for it." And it's like, yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. I get it from like a company risk perspective. Why pay money for something that you don't know? Because there's other stuff out there that maybe you do know will work. So why are we, you know? But it does also create like this weird environment in the market right now. I actually agree completely that that's kind of an issue. And I mean, on top of the funny content, which I think is great, and the analytical content, I think the only other thing that I think we need to figure out, like collectively, and I don't even know where I fall on this line, but let's say you can have two extremes, right? You could have one where all of the content in Counter-Strike and all of the narrative and all of the storylines are all driven around just entirely who is the best. Like we only really care about the best tactical teams, the best like individual mechanical skills. Like that's all we're just, it's all just, you know, sort of elite level performance, like elite athleticism or whatever you want to call it. Like just that's what we're in. This is Counter-Strike. We're all hardcore like that, and people have to only care about those things. But on the other end, we could say, well, what if we got the funniest players that we could find? So we get like, well, Josh is playing in Valorant, but we get Josh back. We put him together with Smooya. We get like the most. We get Mo in there. We just get the craziest personalities that we could think of. They don't even have to be playing Counter-Strike. It doesn't even matter. And we throw them all in a gaming house and we film them 24/7. And then the internet votes them out as they go along. Maybe like 20 people start, and like you make it like a Big Brother type scenario. And it has nothing to do with whether or not they are actually going to win. What we care about is just purely the entertainment aspect of who these people are and what's going on and like all the drama of it and everything else. Now, I would say if you pushed Counter-Strike towards the entertainment side, I think that'd be pretty sad. But I feel like sometimes we're leaving a lot on the table on that front, right? And I don't know how to sort of. I mean, one thing is like, because sometimes we'll do these player profiles, we'll talk to people, and that's fine. We interview their parents, we interview their brothers and sisters, and we ask them about how they were growing up, and that's all cool. But I still sometimes feel like, again, that's like a cultural switch that the community has to be in on. But there actually, I think, is a lot more personality in Counter-Strike, and I think the players have more personality. But it's being sort of hushed away by a collective unspoken fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or getting a bad reputation. Like no one wants to be the next. Yeah, like maybe he's toxic. Maybe he's always saying bad things and all the rest of it. Like this, from my mind, too much of that going on, and I think that that takes away from it. I think it's a real value. Like if you're someone like Smooya, for instance, and like half the people that watch because they think you're like the AWPer that's going to save the UK, and the other half watch because they pray that you're going to die or that you're going to fail, so that the trash talking you were doing on Twitter earlier can really, like, you're just ready to tweet something at him the minute that he's done, because like, ha, remember you said this, you suck, that kind of thing. But that has a real value. Like, it actually is it's really valuable. Even if Smooya isn't a top 3 AWPer in the world, like that, like because then we could just say we'll never talk about Smooya ever again, let's say. But I think that adds some value, and I think we haven't had that conversation, I think, in public. Like, where do we want to go with this? I think more to the entertainment side, at least a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's enough risk takers, really. It kind of feels like, maybe a little bit in some senses, they see them as risks, but like in block capitals, that this might be something that doesn't work out or completely flops or whatever. But there is also potential that it does really, really well, because it's a new original idea that, a lot of thought has gone into and a lot of preparation, etc. I think that certainly what springs to mind when you're talking about, that kind of entertainment stuff for me is like the explosion of chess on Twitch, for example, right? Because it's not necessarily the craziest thing, the most entertaining thing to watch in isolation. I think some people certainly can be interested in, the intricacies, but then most of the exciting things or things that get big viewers obviously have the streamers attached to them, but I think it comes more off of that entertainment factor, that not only are you watching someone that you maybe like do something different for a change or whatever, and improve and whatnot, but then there is also that competition element between them. They're not necessarily the best chess players until they are, this guy's highest rated in the group, and the person who's played 10 chess games made an incredible move, that kind of thing, right? Like, I think that something like that, we don't have enough personalities to kind of pivot around, because then you could even start to bring them in onto broadcasts to do a little bit here or there. I think in the past it's been like touched on with Parler and whatnot, and he still comes up every now and then, but we need more of it. There's the beginnings in places, that whole gamers thing, right? The you talked about the Big Brother thing, that was kind of close, but hasn't recurred every year, or hasn't really gone anywhere, because I think a lot of these, and working in the online space prior to COVID, right, there's a lot of players that come in and it doesn't work out initially, so they just kind of go away, or they rebrand or whatever, rather than looking to improve, they just move elsewhere. Which is a bit sad, to be honest.
It is, but I even forgot the gamers was a thing. But you're right that it actually did happen. And I guess the only problem with that, I mean, even that actually got so much hype, partly because some of those kids that were in that were a little rough around the edges, but they were Swedish. Like, could you imagine what would have happened if you'd taken like UK players to do that? It would have been amazing. Or if Australian players, like, you could have done that if you made gamers in Australia. Holy hell! Like, it would be so good. Like, people would tune in, and I'm not saying it would drive everything, because obviously I wouldn't want to sit down to watch just, like the worst team in the world just because they're trash talking a lot and they have like an inflated, self confidence or something. Like eventually that's probably going to get boring. So again, like I wouldn't want to push it all of Counter-Strike into this, but I'm just saying that, maybe if we just have like some tolerance for some of these things, like a bit more tolerance for like people being like a little bit outspoken and a little bit rough, and sometimes they'll say some shit on Twitter, and then it turns out that they get stomped on anyway, and it's fine. Like, I mean, it's fine to laugh at people too if they do that, but I just feel like it's I feel like Counter-Strike is like, it's left so little space for that, out of like some sense of like elitism, I think, or something like, like it's like we are the real true, like, like we're so much the true FPS esports place that there's no space for anything like that. Like, we only care about your rating basically, and your like achievements on LAN and all the rest of it, and those things are really important, but I think we're missing and we had it before. This is the crazy thing. This isn't foreign to Counter-Strike. Again, we have really cool personalities, like people that are playing right now, but certainly in the past as well. And I remember when this change happened, like take someone like Taz, for instance, when he was playing early on, I mean, obviously he was notorious in 1.6, and that's not, I mean, 1.6 seems lovely for a bunch of reasons. I mean, partly because of like the madness of people like, Taz and the rest of the Polish lineup, but even in CS:GO, like I've been to LANs where I've seen Taz like stand up and yell at like kids that are just like obviously super intimidated by the fact that he's yelling at them on LAN. But I was crying laughing about it, because it's, from my point of view, that's a strategy. Like, he's not threatening them. He's not saying I'll come and beat you up. He's just saying, haha, you guys are losing. You guys suck at this game. We're gonna wreck you, and we're wrecking you right now. Like that. Why isn't that a legit thing to say to your opponents? They're sitting right in front of you. Great. Like if that intimidates them, then you just have a skill on LAN that they don't have. Like, from my point of view, I'm like, great, cool, let's do it. But that got, as soon as Reddit and Twitter and everything else kind of like really blew up, that just got wiped out. No one wants to do that anymore. No one wants. And I mean, I'm sure Taz still wants to do it, but he's realized, I mean, that's not worth it. It's not a good idea, because people will, I don't know, hunt you down forever for it, apparently, or it just keeps becoming a problem. Whereas I would think of it as like a huge selling point. I care way more about watching. Taz, I think, in CS:GO, I mean, he had moments where he was actually quite good, but I think, he's not going to be like a Simple or a Cyber or a Device or something like that, and never would have been in his career in CS:GO, I think. But so what? Like, I would still tune in every single time to watch that, as long as he's also reasonably good at the game, And there are many people like that, and I don't know why it's this weird self-censorship, or this weird like cultural censorship that just, once it's in place, it gets worse and worse and worse. Like, it goes one way, and it doesn't seem to very much go the opposite way. And I don't know how to change it. I don't think I can change it, but I think it's a problem.
Yeah. Even just down to like interviews and things like that. I know that a fair few players, when they come on, post-game kind of thing, give some sort of PR-ish answers, what I mean, like safe answers, which is fair, and I think that obviously they want to try and protect the brand or whatever, but then at the same time there's a lot of players that don't utilize their brand properly. It seems really interesting to me, because things like fighting, for example, whether it is boxing or whether it is MMA, I'm not really all that into the technicality of those sports, but I will, from time to time, stay up until 4 a.m, because I really want to see, person A live up to the expectation that he set for himself with all the shit talk beforehand. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
you want to see a place for it.
I mean, Conor McGregor is the ultimate example, right? If you're going to talk that much shit, then I'm either going to love it and I'm going to think you're the best fighter of all time, and I want to see you back it up, or I hate you so much that I want to see, like, yeah, he's like, that's the best example probably possible of someone who has proven how that works. Now, it would suck if Conor got beat up. I mean, the last couple of fights are not great, but it would suck if in the beginning, when he was doing it and made a name for himself, if he really got beat up, like, 70% of the time, eventually people start to say, oh, this is no longer fun, because now we realize, like, now you're just an actor and you're not actually good at this thing that it's just a show, right? But when he is good, then it's even better, right? Like, it's so good. And I mean, of course, the problem is, I think that this kind of cultural thing, I think you can't like put it in one place and say now we're in the good place and have it stay there. I think these things like switch one way or another. So I think for a long time we've been tilting that towards self-censorship and people being worried, and like you said, people don't want to harm the brands that they're working for, all the rest of it, right? And if you tilted it the other way, no doubt, 100%, I guarantee it, one day you'll get someone who doesn't just like get a little bit close to the line, but they actually step on it or slightly over it. And and at that moment, I think it's fine to say, "Oh, hold on, we were all just having some banter over here, but you just said something that's no longer banter, right? We were just all saying, haha, you guys are going to be sent home on the next bus, and, hope you've told your parents to keep, like, put on the kettle or something because it's going to be, like, whatever it is, like that kind of thing, and just laughing at people because they suck and now they're going to go home. Like, that kind of thing, maybe that's fine, but obviously, at some point, if it becomes, hope you've already bought the gravestone, like if it sounds like suddenly it's like a bit more real, it's like, oh wait, hold on, are you saying these people are maybe going to die in the real world, like that kind of, then maybe it's trying to reprimand people. But the problem becomes that isn't what's going to happen, right? If someone steps over the line like that, everyone will lose their shit, basically, right? It'll be like, for those people who do that, their Twitter accounts, the whole life will be consumed by just people essentially thinking they're the worst person in the world, And so there's no tolerance for it. No one ever says, I bet he's actually not that much of an asshole. I bet he's just screwed up this way of saying it, or maybe in the moment he got carried away or something. I bet tomorrow if we ask him, he wouldn't phrase it like that anyway. He'd probably think better of it. So I think there's like, I'm sure that if you push the cultural sort of zeitgeist the other way, yeah, we're going to get examples of people who say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or say something that they shouldn't have said. But I think it's kind of worth it. Like, as long as we can all agree to reprimand people and tell them to stop doing that, and that was a dumb thing to say, maybe fine you if you're at the event, I don't care. But then just bring it back and say, okay, well, that's it. We sort of dealt with that. Now we're moving on and do it. Like, now we can move in the other direction, but still have fun and still be cool about it. So I just would rather that the culture moves the other way. And I actually try and make a pretty good point of it. Like, whenever I see someone with like an interview where they give something like because here's a classic example, right? Interview will ask, are you going to win against this team tomorrow? They're a tough opponent. You guys have never beat them before. Is tomorrow going to be the day? And they'll say, oh, they're very good. We very much respect them. I think both teams have a good chance of winning. Cool. Like, no, I don't care about that shit, Like, I would much rather have them say, yes, we've studied them very well and we're going to stomp them into the ground, And if you don't, then I'm still more interested. I'm still happier that you gave that answer. I mean, I don't want you to fake it, but if you actually feel confident, and I hope that you do, because I don't know why you're competing if you go into the match thinking, like, oh, we're probably going to lose, or they're probably better than us, like, then you probably are in the wrong line of work, So I bet you feel confident, then say it. Like, let's that makes me interested. I'm like, okay, this is really fun, And I think we don't have enough of that, and I think it's possible to change it through like a couple of small things, maybe, or just like an overall move in the other direction. Like, more people were being like, yeah, actually, this is kind of okay. So that's my dream.
I think it is a shame not to, harken back to 2020 again, but I feel that there would have been space for it on. We saw tiny little bits of it, at the first Flashpoint. And I think that some players are willing. And I think this is what we need to kind of give them as well, like on a broadcast and whatnot, is a bit of a controlled environment so it doesn't get too crazy. Maybe you have a little bit of it live, but I mean, I don't know, you probably have a better idea, but I would say, like, if they want to practice or whatever, like if they're not quite confident in themselves, obviously you can do that with everyone there off camera kind of thing. And I hope that it is coming. I hope that it is coming, because we also have, like, that's the one thing that Flashpoint's kind of hit the nail on the head with, is like, in CS we are a little bit more of an adult game, a little bit more of an adult community, in age, if nothing else, right? So I think that there's room for that, and perhaps the more mature members of the community will be a little bit more open to the shit talk and to recognizing the line between that banter and between being a bit more serious, or again, it's like things that are offensive versus things that maybe have come out the wrong way, and being smart about that kind of thing. I think again, Conor McGregor is a really good example of it, right? Because obviously the fight against Khabib was just very, very wrong from him. Some of his actions before the game and whatnot, rather than maybe he said something that is a little bit, he's made a joke about his mum, and his mum's recently passed away. Conor didn't quite know that, that kind of thing, right? Like versus being overtly violent or whatever before the fight happened. So I think that there should be space created for players and personalities and whatnot to create kind of rivalries. Do you think there's maybe a place to begin or to show to have rivalries within like casting teams, talent teams and whatnot, or is that a bit harder to pull off? Maybe like between analysts, I don't know, like one's a really big fan of a team and the other isn't. I don't know.
Oh, maybe it's probably hard to do, I reckon. I think so. I mean, I think we're sometimes feeling like a little bit of the same stress that maybe the players are, but like I noticed that it's pretty much. I never see any conversation on any outlet that has to do with Counter-Strike about, let's say, casting, for instance, that doesn't involve. Like I don't know. This is like an internet phenomena, I think, but no one ever says, I really like A because A has these qualities, and I think that's really nice, and I appreciate that. People say, I really like A because he or she does these things much better than B, and B is really shit because they don't do these things. So it becomes like a way of trying to sort of elevate one person at the cost of another always, and it's really weird how that functions on. And it's like I think it's like almost like a poverty of language. Like it's actually. It's like a really bad rhetorical trick, because in some situations it would make sense to say that I think Mark is really tall because he's 2 meters as compared to John, who's only 160. Like the comparison makes sense at that point in time. Yes, one is definitely taller than the other. We need the comparisons because otherwise, what does it mean what does tall mean? Like if there's another human being alive that's 10 meters tall, then so sometimes we need that. But for a lot of things like that, for a lot of things that are happening in that space, not really. And I think what happens is people end up taking it, like people in casting are already most of the time nervous about whether or not they're going to get hired for the next event and whether or not they are currently better than some other people that they compare themselves with. And like all this constant thing going on, right? So I actually imagine people are going to be super nervous about any kind of thing like that, because I bet there's gonna be a fear built into it that they're gonna end up on the wrong side of the community, And this can happen in all kinds of ways, right? I mean, I felt it for a while with like Danish Counter-Strike because I'm from Denmark, and people would say, "Well, then you have to like root for North and Astralis." And whenever I noticed it when we do these prediction things on the tournaments, and I would say, I think Astralis is gonna lose this one. People would kind of take it as sort of like why are you betraying Astralis in this way, and I felt super incentivized to just go with Astralis and also because it was cheap internet points for me. All the Astralis fans are gonna be like, yeah, Anders is on our side again, it's sick. So I think we probably shouldn't be guided by it, but to some extent, yeah, I think it's probably tricky to do. I don't know if the analysts feel the same way, but I've noticed that, like, for instance, I think actually something that Jacob Pimp does really well is he's really good at actually delivering some pretty harsh, like singers at his the other people on the desk, but in like just enough of like a fun, like it's actually almost so hard sometimes you sort of feel like, oh, that must have been a joke because there's no way that he would have said that otherwise. So I kind of like that. I think that there's probably room for it, but again, I think mostly everyone is kind of scared of the internet, mob, and it's not to blame the audience because that internet mob is probably fictional most of the time. It's just in people's minds, right? But yeah, I think that's probably part of the problem once again, But it would be fun. It could be cool to do more of it because right now, I don't know. I'm trying to think about how, let's say, Samler and I would do it. And I mean, if we were watching Vitality versus Astralis, and I say, I think Vitality's going to win, and Samler says, I think Astralis is going to win, we just move on from there. Like, I don't try and defend my position or say, well, get ready to be wrong, you know? Like, it is not that I don't do like a lot of play like that. I don't know if it would. It's an interesting idea. Maybe it would be worth exploring more. Not to make it theater, but just to you know, could emphasize that. You could probably emphasize that more if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think there's you know, watching not a lot of football, but like a fair amount of football in the UK, obviously, just by virtue of it being everywhere. Their punditry and whatnot has a few more characters, has a few more, you know, just kind of genuinely like opinionated people and whatnot who are really not afraid to disagree or to call someone out for being a bit of an idiot kind of thing with their opinion. Again, there's a way of doing it and whatnot, and I think you need to have that connection, which I think certainly is something that we're starting to see evolve over the past year with so many of the same teams cropping up, you know, like the ESL guys doing so much for so long, and then the Blast desk and whatnot, you know, recurring and everything. I think we are starting to see a few more personalities shine through because they feel more comfortable with the people that they're working with, perhaps. But yeah, I feel that that's also another step to perhaps improving some of the entertainment value and whatnot. And maybe if you are within a game that, you know, has potential to be exciting, but maybe they're heavily outmatched, or the first map that you're coming back from, you know, after the break was very, very one-sided. What do you talk about? You know, that kind of thing. I think pushing a little bit more for characters to, again, deal with some of the I think stale is like not necessarily the best word, but perhaps some of the repetitive nature to some people during broadcasts.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely something. I think you've identified something that could definitely be much better. Where you know, because it is funny if, like, obviously if I just say, I think Astralis might win. It's kind of what I was just criticizing the player interviews for, with saying anyone can win on a good, like, we respect everyone. It might be the same thing that we're doing. You know, come to think of it, it's like yeah, they could definitely win. It's going to be an interesting game, like that kind of thing. Whereas obviously it's more interesting if I say I woke up this morning and I am so sure that Astralis is going to win. In fact, like I think they're in 2-0. I don't even think it's going to be close, like that kind of thing. That is just more interesting. Like it feels, and it's more interesting for me actually as a caster, right? Like I would be more invested in that game as soon as I put any kind of skin in the game. Whereas as long as I don't, and I'm just like 50-50, you know, I'm just betting all the horses, and then like it doesn't really matter who's good. Like that kind of thing. It does that does kind of suck. I don't know if I've given a lot of thought to it really, so maybe I will now, because I do actually think that's like an interesting idea. Because probably that does make the whole thing like a little bit more. I guess the thing that people do, the way what we've done in some dumb way is we've said, well, the predictions are just like an overall label for that kind of thing. Like as long as you make your prediction, that's your skin in the game. But it's not. They're just like, who cares? I don't know. I don't care about predictions. Like, do we have the prediction scores about who's? I don't care at all about what's happening there. But you know, if it was on record that I really like seriously predicted this and I really thought it would happen, like, it'd be interesting, you know. Like I think we could put some more weight on that for sure.
Yeah, I do kind of feel a lot of it resonates though, doesn't it? Like that whole maybe there is a fear of it, and it's worse than it seems with, like, you know, the internet mob, as it were. But I do feel that from time to time, you know, your casters and your analysts and whatnot will get more stick even than players, and perhaps have a little bit less defense in a way. I don't know. It's all mental gymnastics, isn't it? It's like very, very difficult to work through, and obviously what makes the whole industry unique is kind of navigating through the internet, as it were. You know, it still plays a part in conventional sports and stuff, but certainly not as much. And I think it's scary. And again, it all comes down to sort of taking risks and building things over time and finding the right way of doing it. and who will be the first through the door in that sense, is always the difficult question for me.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I wanted to move a little bit further forwards into perhaps as a casting dynamic in a way, because there's a few things that obviously you've had to go through career wise, not like super difficult or anything, but I wanted to touch on actually how you feel about tricasts, because I know it's something that we've tried in CS to incorporate, and I feel like you, Semler, Moses were a relatively big proponent of that. Is it something that maybe you have left by the wayside, or is it more, again, down to broadcast decisions? What's your feelings on that in today's day and age?
I think they work pretty well overall. I think some people, I don't know why there's this weird feeling, I think, for a lot of people, that it's a very hard thing to make work, but I'm not sure that it is. Like, I think it's just like, I think online a tricast would be a nightmare because you couldn't tell who was about to talk. But in person, you're just looking at the other people that are next to you, and you can tell. You can even just have hand signs that say, if I want to say something, I'm just going to put out my hand. So, like, you can make it pretty obvious that I want to say something, and like, I don't think people have to talk over each other that much. So from like a technical perspective, I think it's pretty doable. I think that one of the big advantages, first of all, it has the advantage of making it seem more like, especially if it's a grand final or something, you're like, okay, well, like, it feels different from the rest of it just because of that. And also, sometimes if you have like a lot of really talented people that are working the broadcast, it sucks if you can only have two of them on the, like, the fact that you could fit a third one into the tree. It's like you're getting more in there. Like, it's if we have a Sean Gares or a Jason, or like, if we have someone like that, then we can like put them in, like, we can actually get them to be more part of the show at that moment. And I just think that feels really cool. So yeah, generally speaking, I think it's a good idea. I want to do it more. I can't think of many scenarios where I couldn't figure out a way to make a tricast work with almost anyone, I think. So I mean, I don't think we should do it all the time. But I think for certain like big games, big matches where you feel like you've got the right people, the right analysts that could sort of like it makes sense if it's like a normal casting duo, and then added some sort of an analyst that could sort of, in the middle of it say, hold on, I'm just going to take 10 seconds during this warm up or during this timeout, freeze time, whatever, to just explain something important that I noticed, Like, that kind of thing is just, I think, is pretty cool. I think it works well.
Yeah. Fresh perspectives, I think, definitely adds to, again, that intrigue, and just getting more and more views, more and more eyes on it, more and more voices, keeping things fresh, like I say. It is curious to me, though, because there was a period where it was attempted a little more readily, right? And it seems to have fallen off. Even bar like last year and everything going on, you could argue logistics and whatnot. I think even in like 2018, 2019, there wasn't as much of it. Do you think there's a reason for that? Is it like logistics? Is it just not wanting to try it? Is there a lack of people who, even talent-wise, don't want to do that if they've not casted before?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who, like I said, I think both from like a production point of view, but also in the talent pool, that don't really feel comfortable with it. But I think those fears are kind of not warranted. Like, I think people should just do it. Like, just jump, it'll be fine. Like, as long as people are willing to compromise a little bit on how much speaking time they have, and as long as they're like, again, they're looking at each other, basic hand signs, like, I think it's pretty easy to make that work, honestly. So, but I think, yep, there's definitely, I think, a little bit of apprehension around it. I don't really know why. So hopefully it'll still come back and do some and do some more. But I think the other thing that's maybe also, I think, happened a lot for a long time now, because there used to be that, like, let's say Semler and I would go to an event, but then we would spend some part of the event, maybe like in the group stage, some of the opening matches, like best of one games, not really necessarily like, I mean, they're important, but they're not super hype matches yet. Some of those we would like, I would be casting with Pansy, and you'd have like some sort of switching around kind of thing, which would also keep things interesting and different, and just like, make everything a little bit more creative, perhaps. And then once you got to the playoffs, you said, okay, well, now we're going to be joining up on our regular sort of teams, and we're going to do that. And I think that went away because, again, like, everyone got real paranoid about, like who's the best, and like these casting duo things are really important, and I think they are important, but it became too much in some weird way. Like it became too, I don't know if it was too competitive or it just like it did something bad. I think at one point, that wasn't helpful. I think to anyone really.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely would like to see more of it, though. I don't know, maybe the game as well itself, CS, it is quite hard for a third person maybe to get in there, and perhaps indeed like a decent amount of practice, a decent amount of knowing the other people that you're working with kind of thing would be required. Obviously, like they slot it in quite a bit in League when things start to get serious. They, Worlds and whatnot, they have 3 people on, but then there's a lot more room there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think there's a fair amount of room within CS as well. It kind of depends. Yeah. I think. I guess when you get into your more serious games, you're kind of expecting things to be a bit faster paced, a bit closer, maybe not as much room to slot that in. But yeah, and I think there is a little bit of apprehension with the newer talent. I can definitely see that if maybe you're asking them to like play by play or whatever. It certainly is difficult your first few times to talk fast, and whatnot. But I think like freeze time, another voice to come in, even just from like the analyst desk or whatever, or if it's something a bit more extended, you could have them very, very quickly picture in picture. Here's a breakdown of a round, thanks to Skybox, and all that kind of stuff. And
actually, I mean, ESL have done that a couple of times, right? Where they've had sort of chat on like like dial in immediately. He's like, boom, doing it. So I agree. Like there are a lot of different ways in which it definitely can work, and I think the value added is pretty huge. Also because when you're casting the game, you're paying attention to like certain things, and there are other things you almost can't notice. Like if I'm casting a game and then I go back home, and this happens sometimes for me, I'll go back home and watch the same game just to find like certain things that I was interested in, and I'll realize that a lot of the stuff that I was saying was like I'd missed some important detail, and I kind of I wish I could, and that's fine. Like again, like I said earlier, that's just how it is. Like you're not going to be able to not do that. But I think similarly, if I was listening to Chad and Alex casting, and I was just in the green room waiting, listening and watching the game, I could probably find like a couple of things that, in the heat of the moment, they weren't noticing. And if I could just like call in for a second and say, hey guys, did you see they did this thing? It's really interesting. Like that, not because I'm, necessarily better, at looking at the game. There's nothing to do with that. Just because I'm not casting, I'm probably able to see like a couple of things that are interesting. So I think like, yeah, there's some value there that's being left on the table too, for if we don't at least do it every once in a while and like test it out and play around with that.
Yeah, I think so, right? I hope that this next kind of 6 to 12 months is full of a little bit more risk taking, a little bit more putting your best foot forward, and maybe taking some chances on changes and freshening things up. But look, I usually like to stick and keep the interview to about an hour or so, and we've broken that mark here quite readily. So we've been chatting away, been a lot of fun. And again, I really want to thank you for coming on. I've enjoyed this very, very much, and it's been a great little conversation with you, sir.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you very much. I'm glad you took the initiative again. Yeah, it's good to have these kind of talks. So thank you for having me.
There you go. Oh man, so much fun, so easy to talk to. That's our first interaction together, and I was a little nervous going into it, I will admit, and once we got the conversation flowing, even off camera, it was so easy to just get into it and ask those questions that I wanted to ask, and keep it conversational without losing myself too much, or whatever. Once again, huge thank you to Anders for coming on. And once again, just to remind you guys, we are going to be having that regimented upload schedule. I'm saying it twice so that I am holding myself accountable. There is video evidence. But every Wednesday is when we're going to have a new interview, probably around 5-6 p.m. GMT, UK time. But the timing, I probably can't get 100% just because of, upload speeds and all that. Nonetheless, as always, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your support, and I will catch you in the next one.